The printer jam that ended my marriage happened at 6:07 a.m. On a Tuesday. I was supposed to be too tired to notice anything. I was in my robe, hair in a towel, holding a mug like it was a permit to be alive, when the home office laser printer made that grinding cough and flashed, "Jam in tray 2. I hit cancel. It ignored me like a cat. Paper stuck half in, half out. The way truth gets stuck when it doesn't want to be born. I popped the tray, fanned through warm sheets, and felt handwriting under my fingers. Not ink embossed letters pressed by a ballpoint. I peeled back the crumpled page and saw a header in neat serif type. Gestational Carrier Agreement. Between Dr. Evan Hale and Mrs. Klein. My husband is Dr. Evan Hale. A second sheet slid out, face down. I flipped it and read, Intended Parents Declarations. Under spouse, partner consent there was a line for my signature. The line was empty. But below it, in scanned gray, I saw my name typed by someone else. Consent presumed per Clause 8C. Clause 8C said, if one partner is unavailable or unwilling to sign, consent is presumed for the purposes of timely medical procedure. My mug hit the carpet. Coffee bled outward like an eclipsing galaxy. The next page had dates, appointments, a timetable for injections. The timeline started 2 months ago. The surrogacy clinic was 20 minutes from our house. The initials EH and SK were at the bottom of each page, neat as math. I sat on the floor and watched the printer feed out my own replacement. Evan is a fertility specialist. He helps people make families for a living. The irony is grotesque enough to be lazy writing, but it's not writing. It's my kitchen rug drinking my coffee while the machine gives me my husband's future children. When he came downstairs in scrubs, he blinked at the mess. Paper jam, he said, because men like Evan narrate the obvious when they're innocent and the non-obvious when they're not. I held up the contract. For a second he did nothing. Then he lifted his hand to his face, the way he does in surgery when he can't touch sweat, but needs to acknowledge it exists. It's not what it looks like, he said, with the courage of a man who has never had to outrun his own sentences. It looks like you're having a baby, I said, and I'm the clause. He reached for the papers and I pulled them back. We've tried for years, he said, soft. We talked about a donor. We talked about a gestational carrier. We talked about us, I said. Not you and a woman I have to index as S. Klein. He sat on the ottoman like a person performing calm. She's not. This isn't an affair. No, I said. This is a plan. He exhaled. Sophie is a colleague. She's single. She wanted to co-parent without marriage. He stopped. I wanted a child. And I wanted to spare you more blood tests and hope. So you spared me my own life, I said. Please, he said. It's not like that. I waved the contract. It's written down like that. He said all the lines men say when they're trying to rearrange furniture with words. He said he meant to tell me. He said the paperwork moved faster than he expected. He said he left the printer job queued by mistake. He said my name appeared in every section as partner, which is legal proof that I mattered. He said this wasn't betrayal, it was mercy. I unplugged the printer. Mercy asks permission, I said. Betrayal fills out forms. He swallowed. There's a consult at 8. Sophie will be there. Great, I said, standing. I'll make 3. The clinic's waiting room was a catalog of emergencies turned into projects. Careful lighting, plants that pretend not to be plastic, a quiet hum of machines doing math for bodies. The receptionist looked at me with receptionist kindness sufficient. Immediate, not for keeping. Name? Hale, I said. But that might be disputed. She didn't ask. She handed me a clipboard the way lakes hand you reflections. Sophie arrived in a navy raincoat and sneakers that could sprint. She looked like a person who founded volunteer programs and actually showed up. She carried a manila envelope thick with justice. Nora, she said when I said my name. Hi. Not shy, not guilty like a volunteer showing up to a shift that had been badly scheduled. Are you sleeping with my husband? I asked, because sometimes you aim for the artery so you don't get lost in the capillaries. No, she said, and it was a real no, the kind that doesn't flinch. I'm not. She set the envelope on her lap. We were friends in residency. We reconnected. He said you were done trying. Evan's hand twitched. We talked about stopping, he said. Yes, I said. The way people talk about selling the house they love because the roof keeps leaking. Sophie's voice softened. I told him I wouldn't move forward without your blessing. He said he had it. She looked at him. You said you had it. He stared at the floor pattern like it might release a secret. I thought. You thought consent was a mood, I said. The doctor called us back 3 chairs, 1 room, a diagram on a screen that looks like hope interrupted by statistics. The doctor blazed through hormone protocols and risks, as if we were all on the same team. "And you, Nora," she said, turning to me with a scripted smile, "you'll be listed as secondary guardian in the co-parenting agreement." "No," I said. Evan's head jerked. "Nora, please." I put the contract on the table between us like evidence I wasn't asking the jury to imagine. "Clause 8C presumes my consent if I'm unwilling," I said. You scanned my name into a blank line and wrote a clause to justify it. Sophie's face went white. "You said she signed." I said she understood, Evan said, and the room got very, very quiet. The doctor coughed professionalism. "Perhaps we should reschedule." I stood. "Perhaps you should write a clause for that." At home, the printer sat on the floor like a dog that knows it peed on something important. I wanted to throw it away. Instead, I plugged it back in and printed everything: the contract, the emails, the schedule of payments, the donor profile. Evan had chosen a woman who looked suspiciously like me, except she liked pistachio ice cream. I put everything in a binder because I am the kind of person who keeps a syllabus even when the class is arson. I called a lawyer. Tasha again, different office, same winter coat energy. "You have two problems," she said. "Fraud and a man who believes in paperwork more than people." "Do I have a case?" I asked. "You have a story courts understand," she said. "Consent is not a checkbox you can pre-fill." I served Evan at the clinic 2 days later because I wanted the paper to land where the lie was born. He accepted it like a person practiced in aseptic technique, fingers at the corners, no skin on the ink. He texted that night from a number I didn't recognize. "She's not the villain," he wrote. "Don't punish her to punish me. She's an adult," I replied. "She can choose her own nouns." What followed was not cinema. It was calendar. It was discovery. It was Sophie calling me to say, "I'm out," and me believing her because resignation has a different temperature than strategy. It was a hospital administrator explaining that consent can be fictionalized only once in a career before your training start, including your name. It was Evan's mother calling to say she never liked my hair, and me realizing I had never been part of their family. I had been part of their dynasty plan. Evan wanted to settle. "No press," he said, as if anyone but us was watching. In mediation, he gave his speech. The 2 miscarriages turned him into a different species of man. He couldn't stand to see me bleed again. He thought this would save me from grief. He thought he could carry the secret until the baby was a fact we would both love. "Secrets don't grow into babies," I said. "They grow into court dates." "Please," he said to the mediator, "tell her I'm not cruel." "I don't narrate for my clients' husbands," the mediator said, and I loved her like a god. I asked for the house, for the retirement accounts we were supposed to use on daycare and college visits and travel to museums where we would pick a favorite painting and fight about the label. I asked for the clinic to change its policies so Clause 8C died in a meeting where coffee went cold while someone learned what consent means. I asked for an apology in writing that didn't use the phrase "if you felt." Evan offered money and a promise to pull Sophie out of this. "You don't get to pull me out," she said, appearing behind him like a surprise cross-exam. "I'm not your appendix." In the end, the settlement was boring. They always are. Numbers, signatures, a binder bought at a store that sells back-to-school hope. What mattered didn't make the paperwork. I changed my locks and my mind about who I am. Weeks later, I saw Sophie at the grocery store, standing in front of a wall of yogurt that looks like marketing lost its way. We both reached for the same brand and laughed, small. "How are you?" she asked. "Leaking less," I said. "How's your printer?" she asked, with that sharp kind wit you only learn by walking out of rooms that wanted you to stay. "Retired," I said. "We broke up." She held her basket like a shield. "He told me you didn't want kids anymore," she said carefully. "I wanted us to stop drowning," I said. "I'm sorry," she said, "for all of it." "You didn't forge anything," I said. "You believed a man who speaks fluent paperwork." She nodded. "I'm switching departments," she said. "I want to help the part after the clinic, the part where people learn what consent feels like in a kitchen." I walked home with my yogurt and a feeling like a small, stubborn plant pushing through concrete. On my porch, my neighbor's little girl was drawing planets in chalk. She looked up and said, "Do you want to make Saturn?" As if that were a reasonable thing to do on a Tuesday. We made Saturn. We gave it to many rings on purpose. It looked unscientific and correct. The girl asked if I had kids. "Not that way," I said. And she said, "Oh, in the clear, non-judgmental way of people not yet trained to weaponize nouns." A month later, the clinic sent an email titled Policy Update. Clause 8C was gone. All consent had to be explicit and present tense. Partners had to appear in person at 2 stages. Typed names were no longer accepted. The email was boring and perfect. Evan wrote once, "I loved you. I wanted a family." I wrote back, "You loved a plan. You wanted a resume." He married his job. He moved to another state. He sent a mutual friend a photo of a lake and a dog and a coffee in a cup that said, "Dad," and I did not ask the caption to explain itself. Some stories you learn to read without finishing. Some endings are records, not parades. I replaced the printer with a potted lemon tree. It sits in the corner and minds its business. When it fruits, I squeeze the juice into water and drink a tart that refuses to pretend to be sweet. My house is quiet in a way that does not feel like a test. If you want a moral, I have a memo instead. Consent isn't the line you leave blank because you're in a hurry. It's the room you refuse to enter unless the other person holds the door open from the inside. And if you need a question for the comments, because stories like this are, call and response, here it is. If you found a signed plan for your future without your signature, would you confront with the papers in your hand, or walk away and let the plan collapse without you? And what's the one clause you'd write into?
Crazy, right? Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.